Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Looney Tunes Back in Action from 2003. And this is a winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. And this movie was actually selected by Midi Samosa. Congratulations on winning. Thank you for being an awesome patron. And here we go. On paper, I think Looney Tunes Back in Action sounds like it could be kind of the better Looney Tunes live-action hybrid movie than Space Jam. And that's pretty much what they tried to do. As Space Jam 2 languished in development hell after the first one was quite a big hit and sold a lot of merchandise, suddenly they felt they could make a second one, which they developed for probably longer than they ever should have, even though Michael Jordan wasn't going to sign on. Consider doing a film called Spy Jam with Jackie Chan and the Looney Tunes, which actually does sound pretty cool. I'm not sure why they didn't do that. And then also one with race car driver Jeff Gordon, which honestly just sounds stupid. After a while, they decided to start developing Looney Tunes Back in Action with Joe Dante, who is a huge animation and Looney Tunes fan and a personal friend of Chuck Jones, as Chuck Jones never really liked Space Jam. In fact, he considered this movie to be the anti-Space Jam. I think that is true in a lot of ways, because Space Jam is a commercial. It's based on commercials, by the way. People forget that. It was directed by a guy who's most known for directing commercials, not features. And you can tell it doesn't play like a normal movie with like a normal feature director. It plays kind of artificially. I always knew it was kind of, I had shirts of the ads before I'd even seen Space Jam. So I very much knew what was going on there, very aware of it. I know people don't know the lineage, which is confusing to me. Space Jam, in terms of auteur, directorial voice, and all that stuff, is completely different from Looney Tunes Back in Action, in which you have a person who's a fan of the Looney Tunes and has a directorial voice and has a real love of film history, and that's with Joe Dante. And Joe Dante is just an overall fun, awesome guy, loves film history. He's one of those directors who I will gladly listen to any interview he ever gives, because he always has something interesting to say and has a lot of opinions about the history of film. So he should absolutely be ahead of a Looney Tunes live action hybrid. That sounds like an awesome movie right there. They also have Eric Goldberg, who's an amazing Disney animator. If you look at any of these, much like Roger Rabbit, you have a live action director and you have an animation director. Pretty much, that's how the film is a collaborative medium, and very much so with these. And Eric Goldberg did an amazing job, made very fluid semi-redesigns of the Looney Tunes characters, but not enough that anyone would get upset or notice. He was famously known for doing the animation for Robin Williams' Genie. He also did the amazing dream sequence in Princess and the Frog. He's one of the co-directors of Pocahontas, and he was one of the animation directors on Moana and also The Simpsons. So he's a pretty great animator. As well as this was shot by one of my favorite DPs, Dean Cundey, who, if you don't know his name, you've seen some of his films. He shot the entire Back to the Future trilogy, Jurassic Park, most of Why You Know John Carpenter, including Halloween, Escape from New York, and also, most notably, had shot Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And you can tell there's a care on screen. They cast this well. They had cartoony kind of comic actors, from Brendan Fraser to Jenna Elfman. They completely really tried to make an excellent way to combine live action and animation kind of seamlessly in its own world. These guys existed in the same world as animation. I really felt like this is a valiant effort. The problem with this is the studio sort of hurt Joe Dante's chances of doing that, because they kind of messed around with it, and you can kind of tell in the finished product. Most people I've always heard like this film. I hadn't really seen it before this time, and I found this to be really enjoyable. And I think one of the reasons I found it so enjoyable is it's so much different than any of the other live-action animation hybrids, in that you can tell everyone involved has an absolute love of film history going on throughout it. Now, that was obviously in Roger Rabbit also. I think that love goes into the fact that this plays more like a cartoon than any of the others did. They were realistic, live-action world, and then what if a cartoon came there? Looney Tunes Back in Action isn't doing that. In Looney Tunes Back in Action, it's a cartoony, weird, realistic world that the Looney Tunes can also be within. And it's totally fine and no one questions it. There's never a part where people are like, wait, what's a cartoon doing here? Or, man, you toons, or something like that. They've just accepted that Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck are movie stars with everyone else, and they direct it that way. Joe Dante sort of makes this similar, the direction-wise, to like what Robert Rodriguez is doing with the Spy Kids movies. Very cartoony, very colorful, very poppy. Dean Cundey seems to know how to shoot that incredibly well, and they are able to have like a lot of fun with this. There's a ton of references in this, which I know Joe Dante looked like. Despite the fact that he said he had a really horrible time making this and he doesn't speak about it, it's still that Joe Dante fun is all over this movie. Like, I don't know what happened on set, and I'm not kind of questioning it, but from the film I saw, there's so many sequences that I'm like, oh yeah, that's Joe Dante, that I sort of question him saying like this film was taken away from him, because his voice is so much there when he has all the B-movie monster villains from This Island Earth to Robbie the Robot, like to the Daleks, like that's Joe Dante. Like, and it is, you know, if you look at like Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and like the crappier 2000s movies that tried to do the animation style, I'd say this is probably one of the best ones because it actually has a real love to it. Now, I think the studio did mess with this film, and it probably could have been better and a lot more fun. I mean, it's still a really fun movie. I don't think you will come out of this hating this film. I think some people get a little too harsh and say, oh, it could have been this thing, but like appreciate what it is, because I think an amazing underappreciated animator. No one unfortunately talks about Eric Goldberg, but when I looked at his filmography, I'm like, oh my god damn, this guy's like pretty amazing, frankly. And this is Joe Dante's last kind of studio film from what I can find. They also, I think, were able to get people who've seen the game to play with these cartoons. You know, they're not sort of playing off them. They're not playing straight man, really. They sort of are, but they're comedic, cartoony actors. Brendan Fraser is perfect. Like, he does a really great performance. He feels really at home with the Looney Tunes, and he himself is a Looney Tune. I think that's one of the things. Like, the human actors are cartoons with cartoons, which is interesting. They just have different plot lines, and I think he is so ready to do that. I mean, he played George of the Jungle. Didn't he do Dudley Do-Right? Nobody talks about that. Jesus, man, I just got a flashback of, I don't even know if I saw that. Or, you know, Encino Man or whatever. He's ready for that. And Jenna Elfman, who, by the way, I've never liked in anything ever. Like, I really dislike her on like a cellular level. Like, I just, if I see her in something, I just like change the channel immediately. I don't know what it is. I just really don't like her. It's not based on anything of any intelligence, and I'm very sorry, Jenna Elfman, because if you were like, that's not cool, I'd be like, yeah, it's not, but I still hate you and I don't understand it. But I did really like her in this movie. I thought she was actually, this is the first time I've liked her in anything, so maybe I've chilled out on my Jenna Elfman dislike. I think it was because of Dharma and Greg. Was she in that, or was she in the one about the other two people? I don't even remember, because I used to hate her so much. But I thought she was really well cast in this. Her and Brendan Fraser are perfect to do a whole movie with her, with Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck. Now, the plot of this, which I actually think is a lot of fun, takes a lot of cool turns, by the way, that like weird turns that Looney Tunes cartoons would take. So like it feels so much in that world. But it's basically like Daffy Duck has been fired from Warner Brothers because he's not really working anymore and he's being ridiculous. And they get Jenna Elfman, who's the vice president of comedy, fires him. And then the Warner Brothers, who are like two twins, decide they really actually do need Daffy Duck. So they go to try to get him back. But Daffy Duck, in trying to leave, has a security guard played by Brendan Fraser and gets him fired, and they go to Brendan Fraser's dad's house. Oh man, this plot's complicated. And his dad is a spy played by Timothy Dalton, which they never really question, and it doesn't make sense. But Timothy Dalton's Brendan Fraser's dad, who's a big movie star super spy in movies, but apparently he's a big super spy in life too. Who knew? So they go on this big search to find the Blue Monkey, and Daffy Duck, Bugs Bunny, Jenna Elfman, and Brendan Fraser, this is the most 2003 thing I've ever said, go on a spy adventure to get the Blue Monkey, because Acme, the company in Looney Tunes, which is run by a pretty miscast Steve Martin, wants to take it so he can then make everyone into monkeys and then into slaves and then back into people and then buy things. Whatever. The plot is actually ridiculous, but it's sort of like most Looney Tunes shorts. It's almost more like much more gag centric than plot centric, which I actually sort of like if you think of Looney Tunes. Some of the plot of this is a little ridiculous. I think one of the major weaknesses is there are some miscastings. I have nothing really against Heather Locklear. I just don't understand why she's in this movie and like why she's playing a pop star. Like, to me, it's like, was Dolly Parton busy for Dusty Trails? Like, it seems like there's a lot of country stars you could have gotten, or pop stars, or Cyndi Lauper would have been fun. It just, like, I don't understand that casting. Like, it just doesn't make like any sense. She wasn't bad. It was just sort of like, why was what was going on there? Like, what was the point of that? Like, if you're gonna have someone fun do a cameo, like Shania Twain, I don't know, just somebody, so you'd be like, oh, haha, and it like brightened up, but it was just like confusing. Like, was she a pop star at some point? And like, there's nothing on that, and no one cares anymore. I don't know. And Steve Martin probably giving the most Martin Short performance I've ever seen in a movie. Martin Short should have been in that role. I know Steve Martin was a much more bigger box office draw in the early 2000s, which is super weird, but he was, between Cheaper by the Dozen and I think it's Bringing Down the House with Queen Latifah, and he did a couple things. The Pink Panther. He was pretty big actually at the time. I just don't really get what he's doing in this, and like why Ron Perlman's one of his henchmen and isn't actually like Ron Perlman. That's weird. But it's like, to me, it like felt like he was playing Martin Short, but it showed me that like when you want Martin Short, you don't get Steve Martin, you get Martin Short, and that's what they probably should have done. That's what I think. I just don't think he was cast. It's one of the few times I've really not understood why they put Steve Martin in something. I was like, what was the point in this? I don't understand it, but whatever. I think a lot of what works about this is it's fluid, it's weird, it has some great animation sequences as well as like fun, you know, cartoon live action stuff, like this part in the Louvre where they go through various paintings and go through styles. That's amazing, awesome, kind of like, that's a Chuck Jones kind of a joke. But at the same time, I think this plot doesn't really work fully. You can tell this is mangled by the studio. I don't think it's as mangled as maybe Joe Dante's making it out to be. I don't have the original script, so I don't, you know, I have no insider info, so maybe there's some possibility that it was even more Joe Dante than it already is, but it just feels like a very much a Joe Dante sort of movie, which that's what I liked about it. It's sort of a shame because there's so many films nowadays and I'm like, I wish they just get like Joe Dante to do, you know, new Jurassic Parks and stuff like that. But I think what they did is they wanted to make a film that really showed and honored Looney Tunes and the animation and the animators who made Looney Tunes. And certainly he wanted to make something about the making of Looney Tunes in Termite Terrace when they were making those films. And I thought that was too old-fashioned. And I think that was his original, I'm assuming, because Chuck Jones had recently died, his tribute to Chuck Jones, and then he instead made this movie, which was obviously more populous and things like that. I'm curious what that Termite Terrace pitch was. Maybe it involved the Looney Tunes in some way, but I quite like this film. I think it is actually better than Space Jam. Space Jam's not like a great movie, and I don't know necessarily if this is. And I don't know if it really actually makes sense to make Looney Tunes into a feature. I think they work better as short cartoons. Not everything has to be a feature. When I was watching this, even though I love certain sequences and I love certain gags, it doesn't all come together. Now, if Joe Dante had gotten to... It sort of stinks because the guy who made Gremlins and Gremlins 2 and like everything he's made over the years, to me, I would just let him go and make a Looney Tunes movie. I wouldn't decide to fuck with this guy when he's making this. I just think that's a little foolish. But that was Warner Brothers' decision, I guess, and that's what we got with this movie. I'm disappointed by them for doing that. I get that Looney Tunes sells a lot of merchandise, but this did feel like a Looney Tunes cartoon for the most part. I still think it's a fun movie. If you were into the Looney Tunes, I think it's a definite film to see, and it shows, you know, kind of the wonders of Brendan Fraser. It sort of stinks this didn't work out for him because, yeah, I would watch a couple films with him playing off of the Looney Tunes. And, yeah, I wish they would have, you know, let him, you know, the Scooby-Doo Matthew Lillard cameo is great, but like have Tom and Jerry and Droopy, which I guess would have been a little too close to the Roger Rabbit thing, but whatever. They still had fun with like a Roger Corman cameo and a Batman thing and like all those Jerry Lewis jokes in the France sequence. There was a lot there, but it just, I don't think, comes together as a whole. It's sort of like definitely gets a little weak towards the third act, but it's still like, I still had a lot of fun. Like if this was on, I go, oh yeah, that was a fun movie. They really got the vibe of it. And you know, especially if the Louvre sequence was on and things like that. So I think there's certain parts of this film that I think are really strong. I've always heard people talk about how in this film Brendan Fraser meets movie star Brendan Fraser, which is funny. It's interesting they use the Bond that everyone forgets about to be a super spy with Timothy Dalton. It has some interesting, fun choices that if someone brought up, you'd sort of want to talk about because it's sort of like, oh yeah, that was kind of fun. That was kind of cool. I sort of understand people's affinity for it because just those ideas are things you want to talk about, and you can sort of, I think those just little ideas to talk about think about in your mind, which I think it's interesting this film has left such an impression, because even though I heard good things about it at the time, actually, it seemed to go by rather quickly. I'm surprised by its lasting impact, but I think that's more because you remember certain parts. When you actually sit down with this film, I don't necessarily work as a whole, but it gets very damn close. And I think it is still, at this point, closest we're going to get to a good, live action animation hybrid Looney Tunes movie. Maybe those shouldn't exist. Maybe they should just make a lot of good Looney Tunes shorts, which they're pretty much doing at this point. But if you're going to make them, then I wouldn't mind them being as good as Looney Tunes Back in Action was. So if you've seen Looney Tunes Back in Action and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And this was a winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month.